Welcome back to the Daily Crypto Deep Dive. Today's episode is about one of the most unsettling stories in crypto history. Not because it happened, but because of how quietly it happened. Sam Bankman-Fried didn't rise through chaos or hype. He rose through trust, credibility, and the belief that he was different. To understand how one of the most trusted figures in crypto ended up in prison, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. Sam Bankman-Fried's story doesn't really begin with crypto. It begins with environment. He was born in 1992 into a household steeped in academia. Both of his parents were professors at Stanford Law School. His home life was intellectually intense, structured, and rational. From an early age, Sam showed signs of exceptional mathematical ability, but also something else that would later become important: a deep emotional detachment from outcomes that most people instinctively care about. He wasn't reckless as a child. He wasn't rebellious. He was analytical, inward-looking, and unusually comfortable treating the world as a system rather than a series of moral decisions. At school, Sam stood out not because he was charismatic or socially dominant, but because he was relentlessly logical. He was the type of child who excelled in maths competitions, puzzles, and probabilistic thinking. People who knew him early on often described him as awkward but kind, intensely focused, and uninterested in conventional ambition like status, luxury, or popularity. Money, at least on the surface, didn't seem to motivate him. That perception would become a critical blind spot for everyone who later trusted him. Sam attended MIT, where his strengths became even more pronounced. He studied physics and mathematics, immersing himself in quantitative problem-solving. MIT reinforced a worldview that rewarded optimization above all else. If something could be done more efficiently, then doing it inefficiently was irrational. This framework works brilliantly in physics and maths. In finance, especially finance involving human trust, it can become dangerous. Around this time, Sam became deeply influenced by a philosophy called effective altruism. The core idea is simple but controversial. The moral value of an action should be judged by how much good it produces, even if the action itself is uncomfortable or morally ambiguous. In its extreme form, effective altruism can justify almost anything, as long as the end result is framed as beneficial. Sam internalized this deeply. He began to believe that making as much money as possible, by any legal means, was not just acceptable, but morally good, if that money could later be used to improve the world. This belief would later serve as both justification and shield. After graduating, Sam joined a proprietary trading firm, where he learned how markets really work. He learned about arbitrage, leverage, liquidity, and risk. He learned that markets are not moral systems, they are incentive systems. And he learned that speed, information asymmetry, and scale can overwhelm almost any competitor. It was during this period that Sam noticed something most people had missed. Bitcoin prices were significantly higher in Asia than in the US, particularly in Japan. This wasn't speculation. It was a structural inefficiency caused by capital controls, regulation, and demand differences. Sam moved quickly. He founded Alameda Research, initially focused on exploiting this Bitcoin arbitrage. Buy Bitcoin cheaply in one market, sell it at a premium in another. It was dull, technical, and extremely profitable. Within months, Alameda was generating millions. But success changed the scope of the operation. Alameda didn't stay a simple arbitrage firm. It evolved into a full-scale crypto trading powerhouse, using leverage, complex strategies, and opaque internal controls. The firm operated largely without oversight. Risk management was informal. Decision-making was centralized. Trust was personal, not institutional. And critically, Alameda existed almost entirely in the shadows. Then came FTX. Sam didn't build FTX because he wanted to run an exchange. He built it because he wanted better tools for traders like himself. FTX was designed to be fast, flexible, and innovative. It offered products other exchanges didn't. It catered to professional traders, and it quickly gained traction. FTX launched at the perfect moment. Crypto was entering a new bull cycle. Capital was abundant. Regulation was unclear. And there was a growing hunger for grown-up crypto infrastructure. Sam became the face of that professionalism. He spoke calmly, he dressed casually, He slept on beanbags. He donated millions to charity. He testified before Congress. He positioned himself as someone who understood both crypto and regulation, someone who could bridge the gap. Investors loved him. Regulators tolerated him. The media lionized him. Behind the scenes, however, the separation between Alameda and FTX was collapsing. By the time cracks began to form, Sam Bankman-Fried was no longer just a successful crypto founder. He was one of the most powerful figures in the entire industry. At its peak, FTX was generating billions of dollars in annual trading volume, and Sam's personal net worth was estimated in the tens of billions. On paper, he was one of the richest people in the world under the age of 30. And unlike many crypto executives before him, he wasn't hiding from the spotlight. He was actively shaping it. FTX's logo was everywhere. It appeared on stadium naming rights, major sports arenas, Formula One cars, and high-profile sponsorship deals across global sports and entertainment. The exchange signed headline-grabbing partnerships, attached its name to major leagues, and positioned itself as a mainstream financial brand rather than a fringe crypto platform. Sam himself became a fixture at elite events, political fundraisers, and regulatory roundtables, often presenting himself as the voice of responsible crypto innovation. Behind the scenes, money flowed freely. FTX and its affiliates funded startups, invested in rival companies, and bailed out struggling crypto firms during market downturns, reinforcing Sam's image as a stabilizing force. He was portrayed as a white knight, someone willing to step in when others couldn't. That narrative bought him influence, access, and trust at the highest levels. At the same time, Sam cultivated a deliberately unconventional image. He wore shorts to meetings with lawmakers and projected indifference toward personal luxury, reinforcing the idea that he wasn't driven by greed. Instead, he framed his ambition around scale, making as much money as possible so it could eventually be given away. This philosophy disarmed critics and reassured investors who believed they were backing not just a company, but a mission. Internally, however, the operation was becoming increasingly chaotic. Decision-making was concentrated among a small, insular group. Oversight was informal. Risk controls were weak or non-existent. And as FTX's influence grew, so did its entanglement with Alameda Research, blurring lines that should never have been crossed. From the outside, it looked like unstoppable success. From the inside, it was a system held together by confidence, reputation, and the assumption that growth would always outpace risk. And that assumption was about to be tested in the most brutal way possible. Alameda began to receive preferential treatment on FTX. It had access to leverage others didn't. It was allowed to maintain negative balances. Customer funds, which should have been untouchable, were quietly being used to support Alameda's trading activities. This wasn't a single decision. It was a slow erosion of boundaries. Each step was small. Each step was rationalized. Each step was justified internally as temporary, manageable, or necessary for a greater good. And as long as markets were rising, no one noticed. The collapse began when crypto liquidity dried up. As prices fell, leverage turned against Alameda. Losses mounted. The house of cards began to wobble. Once doubts surfaced publicly, confidence evaporated instantly. Withdrawals surged. FTX didn't have the funds to meet them, because those funds were already gone. Within days, FTX collapsed. What followed was one of the most dramatic implosions in financial history. Billions in customer funds were missing. Internal controls were non-existent. Basic accounting practices had never been implemented. What had been presented as a sophisticated financial empire was revealed to be alarmingly amateurish. Sam was arrested, charged, tried. In court, the narrative unraveled completely. The effective altruism defense failed. The argument that he meant well collapsed under the weight of evidence showing deception, misuse of funds, and systemic misrepresentation. He was convicted, and now Sam Bankman-Fried sits in prison. Yet, even from behind bars, his presence still disturbs the market. Occasional statements attributed to him attempt to reframe the story, claiming FTX was solvent, blaming lawyers, minimizing responsibility. None of it aligns with the facts. None of it changes the outcome. But it does reveal something important. Crypto hasn't fully processed what happened. The industry is still wrestling with how someone so young, so trusted, and so publicly ethical was able to cause so much damage. The lesson isn't just about fraud. It's about governance. It's about incentive structures. It's about what happens when optimization replaces accountability. Sam Bankman-Fried's story isn't just a rise and fall. It's a warning about what happens when intelligence, ambition, ideology, and unchecked power collide in a system built on trust. And that's why even now his shadow still lingers over crypto. The collapse of FTX wasn't just the failure of a company. It was the collapse of an illusion. An illusion that intelligence alone could replace oversight, that good intentions could justify bad systems, and that trust could exist without verification. The uncomfortable truth is that this wasn't just one person's failure. It was a failure of incentives, governance, and culture. Crypto wanted legitimacy so badly that it embraced the appearance of responsibility instead of insisting on the reality of it. Even now, the aftershocks are still shaping how the market behaves. Trust is harder to earn, scrutiny is sharper, and promises are no longer taken at face value. Sam Bankman-Fried may be in prison, but the lesson he leaves behind is still unfolding. Crypto's future won't be decided by the next bull market. It will be decided by whether the industry learns from this moment or repeats it under a different name. Thanks for listening. Make sure you are following the show, and as always, we will see you at the top.